Welcome back to the Deeper Podcast. We're here to help you apply what you're reading through the Bible reading plan at New Shores. Today we come to one of the most intense moments in Jesus' life, one of the most intense moments of all the New Testament, of all the Bible really, in John 18. Jesus is going to the Garden of Gethsemane to know that he's about to be arrested and betrayed by Judas. And it says in verse 4, "Then Jesus, knowing everything that was about to happen to him, went out and said to them, 'Who is it that you're seeking?'" I want you to understand something. Jesus knows what's happening, yet he doesn't run, he doesn't hide. He stands strong, he's calm. Now we know he prayed, and he literally sweat blood out of his forehead. That's how intense this moment was. But even when Peter tries to fight back, what does Jesus tell him? He says, "Hey, put your sword away. Like this is not what you think it is. Like I am going to drink the cup that the Father has given me." And if you remember, that's part of his whole thing is, "Father, if you can take this cup from me, then do it. If there's any other way, then do it." But Peter wants to fight back, and Jesus says, whoa, hold on. That's not how this is going to go down. Then he declares in verse 36, as he stands before Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." Like Pilate's asking him, are you the king of the Jews? And he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And I think there's just some moments here that we can kind of pull some nuggets of application out of. The first one is that Jesus is in control even when life feels chaotic. And when the world feels chaotic, and it does, like you would be one who has your head in the sand if you don't think that life is chaotic these days. Even when life feels chaotic, Jesus is in control. He knows what he's doing. He has authority. He's allowing things to happen, but he still is in control. I think another thing I see is real courage comes from surrender. You know, it's easy to fight back about what God wants you to do and where he wants you to go, but Jesus in this moment didn't fight back. He surrendered to the will of God, even though it wasn't what he completely wanted to do. He trusted God the Father completely. And that's the same as true for us. There are going to be things God calls you to do that you're not completely comfortable with, that you're not completely ready to do, but you have to surrender. And real courage is going to come from that surrender. Courage isn't always like this big, like David versus Goliath thing. Courage sometimes is really just quiet and simple obedience. And then I think another thing comes from right when he says in verse 36 to Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world." You got to realize that Jesus' kingdom operates differently than the kingdoms of this world. Jesus' kingdom and Jesus' power was not about military might. It was not about political power or political might. It was spiritual and it was eternal. And we got to remember that if you're part of God's kingdom, you fight a spiritual battle. You're not fighting a physical battle. I think sometimes it's easy for us to fight physical battles because that's just what we see, and it's easy to see what you see. But we've got to see on a level that God sees, and we got to see the spiritual battle that's going on around us. And then I think the last thing is that obedience often requires sacrifice. Obedience often requires sacrifice. The cup that Jesus talks about, it's a painful cup. He knows he's about to suffer. He knows he's about to die. He knows he's about to be beat beyond recognition. But in that moment, he realizes that if things are going to change for the people that I've come to save, I have to sacrifice something by obeying God the Father. Sometimes the hardest obedience in your life will bring the biggest blessing. The hardest obedience that Jesus had was going to the cross for you and for me. But it brought the biggest blessing that anyone in the world could ever imagine. It brought the fact that we can now be called children of God because of what he did. So obedience often requires sacrifice. So if you're not sacrificing for God, there's a good chance that you're not being totally obedient to him. So you've got to know that God's kingdom operates differently. You've got to know that obedience requires sacrifice. Excuse me, that surrender happens. And courage comes from us just surrendering our will to God's will. And know that all through it, Jesus is in control, even when the world feels chaotic.